very pleased to be joined today by the Urban Tree Festival Administrator for 2023. It is Sarah, and I also have with me Marie-Claire Denier, who's the Managing Director of Street Trees for Living. We have Jack Delso, who's Tree Services Manager for Lewisham, London Borough of Lewisham, and I have Rob Tustain and Steve Pocock, who are both directors of Greentalk. The presentation will take the form of Marie-Claire will go first, and then it will be Rob and then Jack. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Marie-Claire and she will start the presentation.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm just looking to share my screen. Here we go. There we go. Can everyone see that? I'm hoping that's yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Marie-Claire Denier. I'm the Managing Director of Street Trees for Living. And we are going to be talking to you today about one of our pilot projects called Grow Back Together that we are doing in partnership with Greentalk and Lewisham Council. So throughout my part of the presentation, I'm going to be talking about Street Trees for Living's involvement, and then we'll be passing you on to Rob from Greentalk, and he'll be talking about Greentalk's aspect of the project, and then on to Jack from the London Borough of Lewisham. So we've all got quite differently defined roles within this project. So I'm going first to give an overview of Street Trees for Living, and here we are. So Street Trees for Living, we are a community-led street tree planting charity. We've worked mainly in the London Borough of Lewisham, and we started about 12 years ago now. It started very organically off the back of residents in Brockley reacting to trees being felled in their area. So they wanted to have these felled trees replaced. And the council, unfortunately, as I'm sure everyone's aware, couldn't afford to replace all the trees that were being felled. So they approached the council and said, look, if we can provide match funding and we can help care for the tree, is it something that we could work with the council to implement? And the council agreed. And then that went from one tree in 2011 and then started to grow, spread out more widely in Brockley, and kept growing until in 2019, Street Trees for Living became a registered charity. Off the back of becoming a registered charity, it meant that we were therefore more able to apply for public funding and grants and do some slightly more targeted planting. So the residential street tree planting is brilliant, and it's grown over the years, as well as a lot of Street Trees for Living volunteers, not just in terms of people wanting trees outside their street, but there's a lot of volunteer involvement in running the charity, from social media groups, fundraising groups, maintenance groups of tree care. It meant that we were able to apply for funding to then target other areas of Lewisham where maybe Street Trees for Living wasn't so well known, or there wasn't maybe the ability to fundraise, to provide match funding for trees on your street. So I'm just going to move that, so I'm not sure if you can see that. So it's meant that, yeah, to date we've planted approximately 2,000 street trees and counting. Our projects are growing every year, and we're in a situation now where we're hoping to roll out some of our projects into other London boroughs. So next slide. Well, so just to give you a little breakdown of our charitable objectives. We have two paragraphs here, but one I'd like to bring your attention to is the bottom of the second paragraph, where it says that we're here to promote the benefits of a healthy relationship between trees and humans. So very much our work is about the community engagement that comes with street tree planting. And not only does that community engagement mean that we have a good survival rate for our trees, because we have the communities involved and we bring the communities to the trees and the trees to the communities, but we also bring communities together. So we find that our street tree planting, it brings people close to nature, but it also brings people closer to one another and has really beneficial impacts in that way, where people who live on the same street will get to know each other, whereas they might not have before, through the planting of trees, and meet like-minded individuals and make new relationships. So that's another really important part of some of our charitable objectives. So just to talk about the projects that we're working on. So I'm a bit more comfortable talking about this because I know them all very well. So we have, not that I know everything very well, but this particularly, we have our residential planting. So that's what I was talking about. That's how the charity grew, literally from the ground upwards, with residents coming to the council, coming to Street Trees for Living, saying, we'd love to have a street tree planted on our street. We can help provide funds and we can help look after the trees. And we have a really important volunteer system in place for this, where we have street reps, people who live on their street and will canvass their street to help to either find tree guardians or become the tree guardians themselves. And then we also have area reps. So there's sort of like a hierarchy where you have the tree guardians, the street reps, and then the area reps. And the area reps are ward reps. So that's a volunteer within each ward of Lewisham who will help to coordinate and oversee the street reps and all of the work they're doing on their streets. So to date, that's been a very successful scheme, but it is mainly based on those volunteers that is then coordinated by members of staff within the charity. And then to complement the residential planting projects, we have what we call Communities Blossom. So that is our more targeted planting, and that is more of the projects that I run. Within Communities Blossom, we have the School Trees Project. So that is where we work with local primary schools. We've started working with secondary schools as well to plant avenues of street trees, either on the perimeters around the school and also inside the school grounds. And that has a number of benefits, from helping to provide screening between the car emissions and the playground, also preventing illegal on-pavement parking, preventing parking from close to where children are scooting or running or cycling to school. The schools get involved with the watering. We provide lesson plans meeting national curriculum requirements that then they will look after the trees, the pupils will water the trees. The lesson plans help to support that interactivity by getting the children involved in the tree naming competitions, in creating decorations for the trees and dream forests. So that's something that's been a really impactful in Lewisham. We planted over 300 trees with 30 primary schools to date, and it's evolving all of the time. So last winter, we also increased that to include youth centres, colleges, universities, nurseries, mental health care establishments. We've also worked with Lewisham Hospital. And now we're looking to work with Lambeth and Southwark to roll out the School Trees project within other boroughs. And then the last project that we're going to be talking about in more length today is Grow Back Together. So that is a pilot project that we are now working on. I don't know, can you see that? So Street Trees for Living successes, just to try and wrap that up, we like to think of our USPs, as I've said, is the community involvement we have with the street trees. We don't plant street trees unless there is community involvement from the outset. So the community are very much involved in where the trees are going to go and what species we'll be working with. And we know that there is that guardianship of the trees, that once the trees have been planted, people will be there to look after them. This leads to another of our successes, which is our high tree survival rate of over 95%, which is something we're very proud of and not something that necessarily all other local authorities share. And it also helps to create meaningful connections with the community and their local authority, their council. They feel like, you know, they're being listened to, and there is something happening to help mitigate the felling of trees that we know can be a very emotional topic for obvious reasons. Next slide. So on to Grow Back Together, today's session. What is Grow Back Together? So Grow Back Together is funded by the GLA's Grow Back Greener Fund. And we called it Grow Back Together because we wanted to emphasize the fact that this is something that needs everyone's involvement within the area that it's happening. It's not just a matter of us coming in, planting trees, going away. This is everyone working together to ensure more trees and a higher tree survival rate in those locations. The aim is to plant up to 100 standard size street trees in old tree pits, so vacant tree pits, so tree areas where there used to be a tree, where a mature tree has been felled over the years. There are thousands of those across the borough, and we've been identifying ones in certain areas to create that sense of a tree growing back and us all helping them to grow back together. But Greentalk will talk to you a bit more about the choices of locations. So the model that we've used is we partnered with Greentalk to create a digital platform. So they've been working on an excellent website in order to create an opportunity for people to sign up to the scheme and become tree guardians. So this is a very new approach for us in terms of residential street tree planting, because most of these pits, these vacant pits, are outside houses. And where we've worked with residents in the past, that's normally been because a resident has come to us and said that they would like trees on their streets. So this is quite different. This is us going to streets and saying, we would like to plant trees on your street. And it will be very interesting to see how that's met. And the Greentalk website is enabling that. It's enabling that by allowing people to have a tech ability to sign up to the scheme and adopt a pit. So I think if you can see in this picture, and Jack will be talking to you a bit more about that, one way of doing it is by actually stenciling on the ground where the vacant pit is and getting people to come to the website that way, and also doing some comms through social media. Our current status is 79 pits have been adopted, so we're not far off the mark. And the next stage is we're going to be canvassing the areas where the trees have been adopted to let residents who live immediately in front of the pit, maybe adjacent as well, what's going on. And as mentioned, yeah, it differs. It differs because we normally have the locations and the people before we plant the trees. Right now we have the locations and we need the people, and we're getting the guardians, but we also want to ensure that the trees are welcome wherever they end up, as well as being looked after. And then next, we don't have a great amount of testimonials yet because we're in the very early stages and no trees are in the ground yet. There's a few quotes from people. And yeah, that's it from me. I don't think I've gone over time. Sure. Stop share. All right. Also, I will hand this back to you.
Great, thank you, Mary Claire. Just let me see whether, as the host, I can just put a message to everyone. So I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's going to take you to the through the next stage of the project, and I will do that. Reminder, if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A and I will answer, or not I, but the panel will answer all of those at the end. So Rob, if you can give us about 15 minutes.
That's great. Thank you, Mary Claire. And welcome, everyone. My name is Rob Testjane from Greentalk, and I'd like to present to you why we're here and how the project fits how we fit with the project. So this is the website, Grow Back Together, which you may or may not have seen yet. I think that from our perspective, tree planting, it's only part of the solution. There are lots of tree planting strategies and schemes out there, but what we are aiming to do is to try to find a deeper local engagement and a way of being able to reach new audiences. So the way we've been doing it is that we've been looking at ways to connect with residents and local communities to provide an end-to-end solution to do that. And I think by that, we've been working with Street Trees for Living, and I think that our ethos works very well together because they're very keen on putting trees in the ground, but also keeping that mortality rate as low as possible. So there's economic benefit to that, doing that as well. So if you don't know anything about Greentalk, just a few words. We're London-based, and we're a green tech startup. What we do is that we like to use green environmental data, and we encourage users to come to our websites. And what we do is that we want to promote relevant interactions. It touches on things like healthy well-being and also active travel. And we also collaborate with councils, community groups, and local residents. So we really are solutions driven in terms of how we operate and who we work with. So just a few words about the Grow Back Greener Fund. This fund, this was, I believe, the second draft of it, which took place at the end of last year. And it helps to support projects that help make London greener, fairer, healthier, and more climate resistant. And we've been in discussions with Street Trees for Living previously, and we thought that what they wanted to do in terms of plant more trees, that this might be an exciting opportunity to try to bring together our technology and their sort of local resident and community engagement that they do. So at the end of last year, we put together our bid, and I think it took us about 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, which was amazingly quick to put together. And we received the funding to plant the trees. And I think we couldn't have done this so quickly without the relationship that Street Trees for Living has with Lewisham Council. So Street Trees for Living, we're able to reach out to their local network, their community groups, their local reps, but they also have the relationship with Lewisham Council, which allowed a quick access to find out, could we plant trees in these locations? So we were able to deliver that very quickly from our perspective. So some of the criteria that we needed to look at the outset of this fund was, in particular for Lewisham, and you'll see that's the map of Lewisham on the right-hand side. The criteria for us particularly was low air quality, high flood risk, and low canopy cover. So this all sort of forms part of the GLA sort of climate risk area. It also includes sort of social deprivation as well. But you can see on the right-hand side, it's a bit small, but on the right-hand side, you'll see some hexagons in dark black. And those, just to give you an example, those are the areas that we were able to identify using the data as potential areas where we could plant trees. So as Marie-Claire mentioned, we were focusing our attention on empty tree pits, and within those hexagons, there was about 240 odd empty tree pits that were available. So what we did was that we had that data. We had 240 tree pits, potential tree pits that could be planted into, and we worked back to the funding, and we realized that we could aim to achieve 100 newly planted trees in those hexagons. So the first step that we did was that we started to look at how could we develop the website, and on the right-hand side, it's really a very simple process for the users. We put those vacant tree pits on a map. They register, and then they express their intention or express their interest to adopt. If they're successful, we plant a tree, and then they become tree guardians. They look after those trees. When we started off the project, which was in sort of the end of December, beginning of January, our first point of call was to actually look at where those existing vacant tree pits were. And what we did was that we deployed one of our products, which is called Greentalk Gather. And what that did is that allowed the tree officers, Jack, who'll be having just discussing more about what he did on the project later, to go out into the ground and inspect those potential tree pits and to validate them. Another thing that we looked at as well was these were new areas that we were trying to reach. Street Trees for Living hadn't had a lot of local reps in those areas. So we were looking at ways of how can we disrupt this? How can we make this more engaging and interesting for residents? And so what we did was we thought that what we would look at is the idea of spray painting outside or right next to those tree pits. So what we were doing is looking at new methods to be able to reach new audiences, which I think was really important for this particular project. After the next stage then is when the residents become tree guardians, they make a commitment to look after the trees for 3 years. And then all of these trees, they'll be planted by the end of December this year. And then that's when Greentalk will also be doing some post-planting tree care and engagement. So what we'll be doing is we'll be doing things like sending watering reminders to residents that have become tree adopters next spring, summer, to help encourage those residents to go and water the trees. So how does it work? We did do a lot of testing at the outset, and this is one of our first testing phases. We looked at different types of spray paint, different substrates in terms of pavement, in terms of being able to go and spray paint on the pavements. And what we produced was a stencil, and we have three sort of aspects in terms of how residents can get to grow back together. The first is you'll see on the picture on the right, there's a QR code. So that QR code links directly back to the Grow Back Together website. So the idea is that a resident comes, they see it, they see the spray paint, and they can instantly just scan that QR code and get driven to the website. There's also a short code that we produce, which is treehere.com, which you can see on the right-hand side. And what that is it just allows, we were thinking about ways of being able to make it memorable. So for instance, if somebody couldn't remember growbacktogether.org, treehere.com is a nice way of users to be able to get to the site without having to remember a long word. So that was another way of allowing residents to enter the site. And of course, we have the website as well. So this is what the website looks like. When a resident clicks into the map and they try to find a new tree in their area, they will be shown the potential trees that are around them. The view on the right-hand side is the mobile optimized site that we created that lists the different tree pits that are on offer. If a resident is interested in a particular tree pit, then on the left, they would just click that button, look after a new tree here. They would then be presented with an application form. So it's basically a step-by-step action to ask the resident, do they want to be a tree guardian, get their address details and information so that we can contact them and we can validate their application, their expression of interest. And then after they go through the process and they make the expression of interest, they're sent an email that says, thank you. And I believe in June, July time, we'll be able to start sending out the confirmations to those residents. And just as another note, as residents, they go and interact with the website, such as adopt a tree pit location. They can also do things like a particular location or share. Then that comes up on the home screen as well. So the site is live and it shows that there is definite interaction amongst the residents. So it helps bring it alive. Now, managing the project with Greentalk Gather. This is an example of our back end that we provided to Jack, and what it does is that it allows the tree officer to go onto site, onto pavements. There are specific tree points which are already on our app, if you like, and then Jack would go around and he would validate if those tree pits were viable or not viable. has facility for doing things like uploading images, as well as leaving notes and saying when the tree pit was inspected, which is quite important. But that's just an example of from managing a project what needs to happen, and it's quite a critical role in this. And we also have the Greentalk Studio, which provides the mechanism that we provided to Street Trees for Living for doing things like content, and then they can see stats as well. So this is an example of a heat map. Where are we getting the interaction? So this is an example of where the adoptions have taken place so far. And just to reiterate, we're almost at 80%, and that's with just 1.5 months since the project really went live with tree pits on the website, where we've achieved that. So I think it's been really successful so far. And I think in terms of communicating with residents, we work really closely with Street Trees for Living and also with Lewisham Council in terms of developing comms plans, because we having the QR codes and the spray painting on the ground is one thing, but you also need to be able to expand your reach, and they're very critical in doing that. Issue management, we have been getting a few emails, but a lot of those emails have actually been really positive, such as residents asking, how can I plant a new tree in this empty tree pit here? So we've been thinking about ways where we can capture that sort of data and information and perhaps feed that into the future, into future projects. So in terms of future opportunities, we think that finding new locations in Lewisham and doing more tree planting there is an obvious one. We can easily roll out this technology to other locations as well. It's very scalable. So if there's anyone out there that is interested in this, then please do get in contact with us and let us know. And then once the trees are in the ground, doing the things that are really key, such as looking at the viability of those trees planted, and then continuously engaging the public about the program and future programs are real obvious opportunities. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. And I think I'm on time. And if you haven't seen the website, you can scan the QR code, which is on the right there now, if you want to have a look. And thank you very much. And I'll pass you back to Paul.
Thanks, Rob. Great stuff.
Okay.
You need to stop sharing your screen.
Stop sharing.
So if you could just pass the host back to me.
Okay. There you go, Paul.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to post a few links in the chat for everybody there, which include the Grow Back Together website, the Street Trees for Living website, and the Greentalk website. So now I'm going to hand over to Jack, who's going to take you through his experience of validating and spraying the pits and some other insights into the daily work of a tree officer in Lewisham.
Hello, everybody. Let me just get my presentation. Right, hello everybody. My name is Jack Delso, and like said, I am the Tree Services Officer for Lewisham Council. I recently joined the council in February of this year, joining from Sutton Council, where I was also a tree service officer. But before that, I've been a tree surgeon for a number of years. So working on a project that actually plants trees rather than chopping them down has been fantastic for me. It's been why I wanted to get into being a tree officer in the first place. So my role within this particular project did mean that I did start halfway through the sort of project a few months after, so I wasn't involved in the extracting of data for finding where these viable locations are. All the data that was given to Greentalk came from our database system with Arbitrack. Then the next part of it was confirming the viable pits. So a lot of that involved scanning for underground cables, mainly electricity, and also looking at street furniture to see if a tree would get in the way of signs or lampposts and things like that. Once I did find the location and confirmed it, then involved spraying the stencils, uploading photos specifically of the pit itself so that we can give that to contractors to actually get the tree in the ground, but then to upload the photos onto the website and using sort of reference photos of hopefully what the location would look like with a nice tree. And then further down the line, I'll be helping out with selecting the right sort of species for the locations that have been chosen. So the actual process. So like I said, the spray painting was an interesting one for me. I've never actually spray painted, so it was learning quite quickly how paint all of a sudden starts running all over the place if you're a bit too forceful with it. The original stencil that you can see in the photo there did have the QR code, but I found a lot of the time that the QR code, it worked fantastically on sort of large paved areas that were clean and flat. But as soon as you started getting bumps in the pavement or working on tarmac or small sort of brick paved areas, the QR code just didn't show up. So we did eventually move to a stencil that just had, we sort of spread it out and made it larger specifically with the website. And then the uploading of the photos was all done with the Greentalk Gather app, which has been fantastic using that and getting to know it. Throughout this process, the communication with myself and Greentalk and Street Trees for Living has been fantastic and has worked really well. But the biggest benefit for me has been the ability to customize the Greentalk Gather app as I've been working. So as I did the first few sites, I started realizing that things could be changed to make the process a bit more efficient. The main part of that was just changing the data entry points within the app. A lot of it came over was sort of automatically input via the extraction of data from Arbitrack. So for instance, when I was walking around, I didn't need to see the X and Y axis locations, but I did need to see the street number and the sort of having different data entry points sort of clustered together so that I wasn't scrolling throughout the app and sort of losing time. And as soon as I gave those sort of customizations to Greentalk, they came back to me usually within 24 hours with it all updated. So the next day I could go on and could end up scanning more each day. Also, I was able to add data entry points to customize it specifically for what I was needing. And in particular, being able to have a data entry point for recommended species size. So when I was out, being able to see the tree pit, being able to measure the pavement, how far away houses were, would then lead me to be able to recommend a certain species size. Not only that, but we were able to add a note section as well to sort of raise any issues that had been given to me from residents, because as you can imagine, looking like I did in those white overalls and spray painting the pavement, people came out to say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And some of the issues that they raised, I was able to sort of input that so that we can specifically pick a tree species that will suit the issues that were spoken about. Throughout it, as I said, people coming up to me, the feedback was mostly positive. You will always have somebody that doesn't want a tree, unfortunately, on this world. But the residents that did come back always had nice positive things to say, and yeah, seemed to be interested in what we were doing. There were a few bumps in the road as we started this. So the initial 200 pits that were seen as viable, some were accepted, but then once I went back to actually start spraying, I scanned again, and we came across a number of different reasons why they had to be rejected. Usually it was trenches had been put into the ground to lay underground surfaces, or street furniture had moved recently, which meant that the pit was no longer viable. All of that meant that our overall targets were becoming slightly harder to achieve, with less overall potential pits. So we all sort of sat down and analysed whether or not it was best to go back to the rejected pits to see if there were any other suitable sites nearby, but realised that would have meant inputting a lot more new data to each data point and then having to transfer that to Arbitrack. So instead, we had a backup of all of our viable, all of our vacant pits were given to Greentalk, and so we looked at those hexagons in terms of the funding criteria to see where there were other areas that we could move the project to, and in doing that, we added another 150 locations that I went round and did even more scanning and more spraying. But it has meant that we've been able to hopefully reach our targets again. So once all of the scanning is complete, it's all about picking the right species for the right space. So I've gone off and I've created a new species selection guidance for this project, but also for other tree planting projects that we're doing. This has all been created using the fantastic tree species selection for green infrastructure documents that was created by the Trees and Design Action Group, as well as using some of the information from Bartram's Time for Trees Guide, and being able to sort of bring that all together to create a guide that would suit specifically what we need. Within that, we've got a lot of things in terms of the environmental tolerances and sensitivities of certain species. Generally, we're looking for stuff that is drought resistant, but then looking at other sites that we need tolerances for waterlogging, for example, as well as ornamental qualities. So for these sort of projects where we're communicating a lot with the residents, it's best to give them as much information as possible. Will it be a flowering tree? What time of year will it flower? Does it have any particular features in the autumn, whether that's fruit or a nice color of leaf when the leaves start falling, as well as sort of the life expectancy and the credit carbon score as well. The overall aim of this guidance is to create as much diversity within our tree stock. As we're finding, we have quite a high proportion of rosacea trees, as they are. The demand for them is high for their sort of suitability especially for narrow streets. The second aim was to select trees that will have the highest possible sort of chance of reaching maturity. as well as capturing as much carbon as possible. And then finally, to pick species that suit the paved environment, so that we reduce issues in the future, such mainly damaged pavements from shallow routing systems. As everyone knows, the soil conditions in pavements are particularly tricky. There's a lot of compaction, and some trees do not like that, and then start putting on shallow rooting systems. So we're trying to find the best species that will cause as few issues as possible over the lifetime of the tree. The thing that I really learned from this whole project, other than it being great for me to be able to go around the whole of the borough and get used to it in my first sort of few months within this role in Lewisham, has been the Greentalk Gather app, and seeing the possibilities of how we can use it in the future, because we work with Street Trees for Living, who have a huge amount of volunteers and area reps that go around identifying potential locations for trees, and that means a lot of data, usually a lot of photos, but currently has no mapping system. So this app is fantastic for that. Like I say, the customization of how the data can be compiled, as well as the mapping, which makes my life a lot easier getting around the borough, being able to sort of figure out my routes of where I need to be and where I need to scan. And then the photo sharing, which is crucial for myself to be able to find the location, but as well for the contractors as well, to actually plant the tree in the right place. And I believe that is everything.
Great, thank you very much, Jack, for that. You could pass the host back to me.
I shall.
I'm aware from the Q&A as well about the chat not functioning, so apologies for that, everybody. This is the first in the Urban Tree Festival series of webinars this year, and Zoom has updated slightly since last year, and there are one or two things which aren't quite the same as they were, so apologies for that. So as the host for today, I will get onto the questions which have been posed in the Q&A and try and direct these towards the correct panelists. So thank you all very much for those, and thank you to all the panelists for your fascinating presentations as well. Certainly Steve and I have been trying to answer some of the questions as we've been going through, but there are a few unanswered, and I'm sure that some of the answered questions could have a bit more from the panelists as well. So maybe the first one, probably for you, Marie-Claire, is from Jitesh, who asks, after 10 years, what is the success rate of the trees you have planted? And I'm not sure if that, whether you planted any 10 years ago yet with Street Trees for Living, or
Well, we know that the survival rate of all of our trees, so it's not just on a yearly basis, is over 95%. But we do yearly audits of our trees as well. So, and I think there was a question in there about, do you go back?
I think Jitesh had a follow-up question, which was, how do you go back and check them? So yeah, maybe you could talk to that.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons as well why the tree survival rate is quite high, because we have volunteers and an auditing system in place, whereby volunteers go and check on not all of the trees, because obviously that now they're 2000, that becomes tricky, but in the years past, in the more recent years past, they will be checked. And because the trees are planted with tree guardians, quite often if anything does happen to the tree, the guardian will get in touch with us to inform us. If anything happens to the tree within 2 years of its planting, say if it's vandalized, or perhaps if it was dead when it was planted, which does unfortunately sometimes happen, or if it gets a disease, Or sometimes, some trees just aren't suited to the urban environment, might not do so well. Then if that happens within 2 years, then Lewisham Council does have a guarantee in place and will replace it within that time frame. The only reason it wouldn't get replaced is if it dies due to a lack of watering, because obviously a part of the scheme, and in order to sign up to the scheme, is that the tree will be watered by local residents or local communities.
Great, thank you. And another quick question for you as well, Mary Claire. Dean Thomas asks, how do they find out who their street rep is, presumably in Lewisham?
Oh, how do they find out if they've got a street rep?
I guess so. And if they have one, who that is?
Yeah, probably best to just email info@streettreesforliving.org. I can put it in the chat. I mean, it might be that there isn't one. It might be that your streets, I can't talk to you, so I can't ask. But you might have, if you've got young trees on your street, then obviously that's a sign that you have a street rep. But I would email info@streettreesforliving.org, and then that can be forwarded on to the area rep for your ward, who will have those details and might be able to put you in touch to either coordinate with the street rep on your street already, or if there isn't one, maybe you'd like to become the street rep and
there you go.
sign you up to the projects.
Active recruitment. Glad to see that.
Yeah, I never
on.
sleep. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Some more questions as well, and maybe this one's for Jack, which is about the species selection. You spoke quite a bit about that, and there's a message from Teresa saying, why do councils plant invasive species? And I guess that's probably because we don't know they're invasive species until they've been there for some time. But you were making, you referred to the TDAG tree selection document, and also the updating that you're doing about the tree species that will be planted in Lewisham in the future, I guess. But I suppose there's also that length of time that trees have been there and not necessarily knowing what trees will do, and climate change, I suspect, has some impact on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so as much as whether the councils have got it wrong before, like I said, joining in February, can't sort of refer to what's happened historically. All I can say is I see it around all of London. You look at places, and not so much just about the invasive tree species, but trees that have been planted that are too big for the location, which can then start causing issues. The person who lives next to it won't like it, being sort of bashing into their house in the wind. But so that's what I've been really trying to gear towards, is getting as much information as possible to actually get the right tree in the right place, so we don't have these future issues. In terms of the actual,
that, isn't there?
There's a ton. I mean, what the TDAG have done with that document has been done over years and throughout most of Europe, and they've gone off all the sort of survival rates of specific species. They've gone off the surveying reports that happen within each city to see, okay, this species is causing issues with the pavement. All right, what about when it's in the grass? Oh, it's absolutely fine. So it's sort of slowly learning the best location for these species, because I mean, 50, 60 years ago, you just planted what you could, and there wasn't all this information that luckily I have now, and other councils do, to be able to sort of look in and have a better, more educated understanding of what that tree is going to do over its lifetime. With the invasive species, like you say, it's either they weren't known that they were invasive at the time, or that if they were planted, say, 30, 40 years ago when the climate was slightly cooler, now that we have the climate change that we have and the warming within the city, that can have an effect on how the tree reacts and starts putting out more seeds or putting up suckering roots from its rooting system.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple of questions which are probably for Rob and Steve from Greentalk, which is about, one's about canopy cover. So that one's just been answered. I think Steve has beat me to it, perhaps. But I thought that was an interesting one. So maybe if you wanted to just address that, Steve, the canopy cover comes from the GLA's data, which is an open data set, I think. Is that correct? You're on mute, Steve.
Yes, the data, the map that Rob showed early on as to where we prioritized the pits that we're going to make available, used a couple of different data sources, and one was the canopy cover. So we were targeting areas with the lowest canopy cover in Lewisham, and that data comes from the GLA, and was computed 4 years ago, I think it is, and it's available in this sort of hexagon grid that they use for most of their environmental data nowadays, and sort of ward level data as well. But we use the hexagon grid, which is a much smaller grid than wards. And then there was other data as well, which is climate risk data, which is also from the GLA and combines lots of different data sources. And climate risk is a combination of two factors. One is the potential for exposure to climate risk, so areas of potential for flooding, areas of potential of air quality and so on, and then related to the people who live in the areas and their ability to handle those situations. So there's sort of two data sets involved, and they both come from the GLA.
Great, thank you. Another one which is about the app. Sophie asks, is the aim of the app to have one version per project or council, or are you putting everything into a final version? And I suppose that's a slightly difficult one to answer, but maybe I could open that to Rob or Steve to
Yeah, so I think in terms of the project that we're doing now, I think that we can view it as it can either be self-contained or there's potential there for it to be scalable. So, for instance, if there are new projects that Street Trees for Living have in a similar vein, where they want to, for instance, show the trees that have been that they have got tree guardians with, then we have the ability to scale that map to do that. And even longer term, if we want to go as far as doing things like showing all the trees in Lewisham or other boroughs, then that's all scalable too. And it's just, for us, it's about obviously the data, but it's about the layers of data that you want to be able to show. So yeah, we appreciate that. This is a pilot project for this particular bit of funding, but definitely it can be grown.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Vaughan asks, this might be one for Mary Claire and Rob, perhaps, is can a resident sign up? Can more than one resident sign up for the same tree? So I guess that means that there's a load of tree pits they can find on Grow Back Together. There's some very popular areas, perhaps a residential street. There's more than one resident clicks on a tree pit or sees the stencil outside a vacant tree pit and wants to adopt it. How does that work?
So this is about, yeah, so if you've got a tree pit that's already been adopted, but you also want to get involved, this is something we're ironing out, actually, and it would be interesting to hear people's thoughts on this one from the perspective of being in that position yourself. I think what we've decided is that only one person can actually adopt one pit based on a sort of first come, first served. So the person who's first demonstrated an interest in doing so. Otherwise, we were worried or concerned that if a number of people adopted the same pit, there might be a situation where people think someone else is caring for the tree. And due to GDPR, we're not allowed to connect people within the same street to one another. through the website. So it's one that I think for now we're just one person, one tree. But what we were going to say is if then people register their interest, the second or third or fourth people, because I think there have been some instances where 4 people have registered for the same tree, we can get in touch with them and say we would be looking to find funding to roll this out again in future winters and not just this coming winter. And as you've expressed an interest in looking after a tree, we would like to find a pit close to where you live, work, travel, in order for you to then be able to also adopt a tree. I think that's where we're at with it, isn't it, Paul and Rob?
Yeah, that's right. The functionality at the moment does allow residents to make multiple applications, express their interest for the same tree pit. But I think that, yes, that's the situation that we're at now, which is perhaps it's the first come, first serve rule for this. But the positive thing about this is that, as Mary Claire said, that we'd be able to then go back at a later stage, and it gives us this sort of window of opportunity to connect with other potential tree guardians in the future as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, we very much encourage, if you haven't got a pit in the vicinity of where you live that's been stenciled or is on the website, still definitely register your interest in wanting one, because we're hoping to collect that information to support a future funding bid to keep this project rolling and keep building on what we're doing.
Right, thank you. I've got a question which hasn't exactly been asked in the way that in a specific way, but I think it's a question which a lot of people might be thinking is how might this could it work outside Lewisham? How might that work? Because I know there's quite a lot of people on the chat here who aren't in Lewisham, and maybe they'd be interested in doing a similar project.
Shall I go first and then hand over to Rob? Yeah, definitely. I think that this is something that's really interesting and exciting for Street Trees for Living, because we're starting to work with other London boroughs. And one project that we're rolling out with other London boroughs is the School Trees project, because we saw it as a working model that could be picked, lifted and dropped in other boroughs and still thrive and be as successful as it has been in Lewisham, not be quite so dependent on that volunteer input that we have as a charity within Lewisham. And this is one reason why we're very excited about working with Greentalk to trial this in Lewisham, because it is a model that you can pick up and drop into other boroughs in a similar way. So we would be very interested in rolling it out in other boroughs of London.
Great. Rob, have you got anything to add to that, or we're coming to the end? So if anybody's got any last questions, please put them into the chat while Rob wrestles with that one, perhaps.
No, I think I'm with Mary Claire on this one. If you're, it would be great to open up the conversation and have a chat about that. I think that Mary Claire sort of hit the nail on the head. This is a sort of a new thing for us, and it would be exciting to be able to deliver this in other locations.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to send an email info@Street Trees for Living, letting us know where you want it, and that would definitely support our case for applying for future funding or something similar. Okay,
thank you. So we're coming to the end of this webinar today. There's a couple of quick questions. First of all, would you be interested in joining Go Green Eco Urban Festival between the 11th of June to July the 2nd? Robert asks that. I don't know whether anybody knows what that is. I'm afraid I don't, but I'm sure that if Robert wanted to get in touch, that would be something that we could look at. And Vince says thank you to everybody. So Vince is Director of the Environment at Lewisham Council, and I don't think this project could have happened without the support of Lewisham. So I'm sure we'd all like to say thank you to Vince as well. In your chat, I've put details of forthcoming webinars in this series. So there's one each lunchtime, 1 o'clock for the next 4 days. Tomorrow is with the Tree Council looking at the Miyawaki method, or the little tiny forest project, looking at a specific project they're doing. We've got Mapping Tree Equity for the UK with the Woodland Trust on Wednesday. A look at the London Urban Forest Partnership with the Greater London Authority on Thursday, and soil, where do we grow from here, again with the Woodland Trust on Friday. So I hope there'll be lots of things to interest you there. There's a huge amount of things going on within the festival, which goes on until next Sunday. Do look at the urbantreefestival.org website to see what else you might want to get involved with. Thank you very much to everyone for joining today, and we hope to see you at other events. And thank you to all those who have donated as well. Donations really help the Urban Tree Festival. We couldn't put it on without donations from all you wonderful tree lovers out there. So thank you all very much. And thank you to the panelists as well. That was really interesting. Bye, everybody.